We're looking at one of those phrases that can be very, very scary. Pancreatic cancer. We have made so much progress over the last years and decades in so many cancers, but this one is a struggle. It's a struggle in diagnosis. It's a struggle in treatment. It's a struggle in dealing with those words when they are offered to you by a medical specialist, and it's a struggle for families. We've known in just the past few months actors who've died from pancreatic cancer. Alan Rickman, Denise Robertson, the agony aunt, the Apple boss Steve Jobs, of course, the actor Patrick Swayze, many people whose celebrity has brought that condition to a new kind of platform in our public conversations, and we need to be able to talk about it sensitively but openly as well. We're joined by the specialist surgeon Mark Taylor. Good afternoon to you, Mark. Welcome. Thank you for doing this. I know you're a very, very busy man. And Dr. Olive Buckley, who's a GP.
No.
We're not calling you that?
No, I'm not a GP.
We're not? Why did I call you a GP?
No.
I have no idea. Olive Buckley,
yeah.
Welcome. Good afternoon to you. And the reason we want to talk to you first is that you got the diagnosis yourself, what, a year ago or
exactly
just over a year ago? Right,
nearly
exactly a year ago.
Yeah.
I don't know how to begin with that. When you hear those words, what do you think?
Well, it's like as if it's something out there. It's really alien, whenever you do hear the words at first. But I think whenever you consider all the people that have got cancer of every variety, I think one must realise that you're nearly lucky to not get a cancer at this stage rather than unlucky to have to develop one. So I think you have to be very realistic about these things.
Many of us are going to deal with a cancer diagnosis. I mean, what is the figure overall, Mark, in terms of all cancers now? It's almost like 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 of us.
It's certainly
it's
as
that
close
common
to 1
now.
in 3 in terms of all
pancreatic cancer, that has a different kind of tone to it, doesn't it?
Well, I really didn't know anything about it, and I work in the health service, and it was sort of one of those words, but I never knew what the symptoms were. They were of... I just never bothered looking. You heard, different, ovarian cancer and all sorts of other ones where there were outreach programs, with GPs, but pancreatic cancer never came into my vernacular at all.
Did you have any symptoms?
The symptom that I presented with was jaundice, and there was no pain attached to it. I thought maybe it was gallstones or something like that. Went down to my GP, and luckily, as he told me later, it was a bit of a red flag for him because I had jaundice with no pain. And he sent me down to A&E, and they admitted me there into the liver ward.
So if it was gallstones, you'd have pain as well?
Potentially, yeah. So 8 days later, I walked out with the diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, and unfortunately I've got liver and lung secondaries as well, so it was a stage 4, as they would call it. So it leaves it that it's inoperable, and my route for sort of containment, shall we say, is chemotherapy.
What do you say in response to being told all of that? Do you ask questions? Do you just process it?
I mean, whenever you're given the diagnosis at the beginning, it's actually very difficult to think of the right questions. The questions come afterwards. And I think that's, where the availability of specialist nurses and, where there are, doctors making themselves available to you, because things occur to you afterwards. They don't occur just at the time that you've been given the diagnosis, because it's just so out of the blue. But I think something that I've done personally, I had a couple of hours between leaving hospital and going home and meeting my partner to say, this is the diagnosis I've got.
Yeah.
And I had decided, I resolved in that period of time to say, do you know what? I'm living with this. I'm not going to die of this. And I decided that no matter what way I dealt with it, this was going to be head on, positive. Let's talk about it. Let's talk to everybody about it. And that would be one of the reasons why I'm here today.
So it's not going to define you?
No, absolutely not.
Was that question in your mind, how much time do I have?
I never asked it.
You never asked it?
No.
And you've never asked it?
No, and I haven't gone looking on the internet to try and find out. Now, there have been different insurance policies and things like that that I've maybe had a look at. Yeah. And they would say to you, we would need a diagnosis, that you're sort of within a year. Well, because it's such an obscure, abstract thing, how can you define when somebody's going to die? Anybody will give you that, for the insurance company or whatever. So that's what I've based it on, but I really don't want to know.
Day at a time.
Yeah,
Make
absolutely.
the best of every day that you have. That's the way to go. Yeah. Mark, how common is this?
Well, William, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk about pancreatic cancer, and I applaud Olive for having the bravery to come forward and talk.
Positivity is fantastic.
And the positivity is really the key message from this today. We see 250 cases of pancreatic cancer each year in Northern Ireland. It's one of the top 5 cancers that has a very poor overall survival, as you've explained already. Unfortunately, Olive demonstrates that presentation is often at a late stage, and that painless obstructive jaundice is a very common feature that we see with pancreatic cancer patients.
Is there anything we can do? We're going to talk about this more after the 1 o'clock news, of course, but is there anything more we can do to diagnose earlier, to give people an earlier start in terms of, rather than stage 4, stage 2 or 1?
Well, firstly, I think programmes such as this, highlighting some of those subtle symptoms. Olive has suggested that she became jaundiced, but actually when you chat to Olive, she had features of indigestion before that. Quite often, sometimes people have a new onset of diabetes, which is very unusual for them to have developed it when they don't have maybe other characteristics that lead to diabetes. So there are some subtle symptoms that maybe have been there before, and we need to raise awareness not only with our public but with general practitioners and hospital doctors.
Because I'm conscious, because I'm a bit of a hypochondriac, and I mean that in the clinical sense, but I'm conscious that you have to always say, when you've said just what you've said, Mark, those symptoms don't necessarily mean it's going to be pancreatic cancer. It could just be diabetes. It could just be indigestion.
Absolutely.
So if you're listening at home, don't be fretting about that. But if it's a prolonged symptom, speak to your GP, at least have that conversation. That's what you're saying.
Absolutely.
How long did it take you, just remind us, Olive, how long did it take you to get the proper diagnosis?
I was very lucky. 8 days.
Just 8 days. I mean, that's quick.
Days.
Is that quick in the timescale you're describing?
Yeah, because Olive had very classical obstructive jaundice symptoms, and that would be, to be honest, William, and again, not wanting to cause anxiety to people, but if you have that painless obstructive jaundice with the dark urine, pale stools, in our profession, that's a tumour until proven otherwise.
Yeah.
It won't necessarily be in all cases, but that's the mantra to look at. It's tumour until proven otherwise.
And when you look back, Olive, I imagine you wish you had gone to a GP earlier with some of the other signs that you didn't recognise at the time.
Possibly, but they were rather obscure. You know, what I noticed was, come bedtime, I found that my dinner hadn't been properly digested, but I would have eaten about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So what I did was I moved my dinner time forward to 6, half 6, 7, and then I found that, so I masked it nearly by adjusting my lifestyle.
And was that a daily thing? Pretty much.
Probably, yeah.
For quite some time.
Yes.
Yeah.
But nothing, because there was no pain or anything associated, there was nothing that caused me enough concern to actually go to the GP. It was the jaundice was the first thing that showed.
Mark, when you say obstructive, what do you mean?
So obstructive means that the bile duct, which is the tube that runs from the liver down into the bowel, that drains the bile that the liver produces. Obstructive means that bile duct becomes blocked. And the blockage then leads to the person becoming yellow, and in pancreatic cancer that tube becomes blocked because the tumour grows into it. But the difficulty, William, and you can see the difficulty for our general practitioners, Olive has said symptoms were vague. When one becomes jaundiced with pancreatic cancer in the head, unfortunately, resection or taking the cancer away is only possible in about 25% of people. So at that stage, the tumour is at an advanced stage, and that's where trying to find earlier markers in terms of urine testing, looking at-risk groups. We mentioned people with alcohol, smoking, family history. We're learning more about family histories and hereditary pancreatic cancer.
There's some evidence
and
for
there's
that,
some evidence even in terms of the BRCA gene, which you'll be familiar probably with in terms of breast cancer.
Yeah.
So because our prognosis has not changed in 40 years, and I can sit and say today that we can manage colorectal cancer going to the liver. We have fantastic 5-year survival. In fact, most tumours now, you can see a 5-year survival of over 50%. Unfortunately, in pancreatic cancer, it's 5%, and that hasn't changed. If you go onto the internet, there are many
For sure.
treatments and radical diets and various procedures that are
But we also
available.
know this, don't we, Olive? That positivity, your attitude, your relaxation, dealing with anxiety, these things are important. They can affect your outcomes.
Absolutely. It's the day to day, because that's what I'm living, is day to day. And I try and live it as well as I possibly can. Some days I get down, but I shake myself and get on with it again, and just get out, talk to people, be with your friends. Don't hide away. Don't hide away by any chance. There's no need to be ashamed
There's
of
no
having
shame
cancer.
in this. It's a
Absolutely
condition,
not.
for goodness sake.
Absolutely not. Talk to people about your symptoms, even if you have got little things that you think. Talk to your friends about it, because somebody knows somewhere. To refer you. It happened with a friend of mine, a delivery man coming into her workplace, suddenly developed this jaundice. She told him, go to your GP.
It's obvious, isn't it? Yeah. 5.5 minutes past 1. You'll remember back in May, we did a very special programme looking at the challenges of living with a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, which can be devastating not just for the person who's been given that diagnosis, but for their family and friends. One of our guests on that programme was Olive Buckley, who was given the diagnosis the previous year, and she was an extraordinary guest, though that will not be a surprise to those who know her well. Many of you got in touch with us to pass on your best wishes to Olive and to praise her for the strength of spirit, the personal courage she showed that day. Well, at the end of last week, we got the news from Olive's partner, Gary, that she's died a year or so after her initial diagnosis. Here's a reminder of what Olive said to us when she came into the Talkback studio 4 months ago.
Whenever you're given the diagnosis at the beginning, it's actually very difficult to think of the right questions. The questions come afterwards. And I think that's, where the availability of specialist nurses and, where there are, doctors making themselves available to you, because things occur to you afterwards. They don't occur just at the time that you've been given the diagnosis, because it's just so out of the blue. But I think something that I've done personally, I had a couple of hours between leaving hospital and going home and meeting my partner to say, this is the diagnosis I've got.
Yeah.
And I had decided, I resolved in that period of time to say, do you know what? I'm living with this. I'm not going to die of this. And I decided that no matter what way I dealt with it, this was going to be head on, positive. Let's talk about it. Let's talk to everybody about it. And that would be one of the reasons
So
why I'm here
it's not
today.
going to define you.
No, absolutely not.
Olive Buckley, who died last week at the age of 55, speaking to me in May. And to Gary, her partner, her family, and to her many friends, we send our sincere condolences.